I am here in Seneca, South Carolina to interview an amazing man, Curt Davis. The year was 1963, location Camp Grayling, Michigan, and an incredible invention happened this year. So I want to go ahead and let Curt tell the story of the Starscope. Curt, how long had you been in the Army before you thought of the Starscope?
Something like 25 years.
And what were you doing for the Army at the time?
I was working at a store in Michigan, and they were a lumber company, which I had knowledge of plumbing, heating, and electrical parts, and we were working there.
That's
I was
great.
in the National Guard at the time down in Three Rivers, Michigan. This was my assignment, and I was the company commander of that unit as a captain.
That's great. Now, how long had you been in Camp Grayling? Was this an annual thing that you went to Camp Grayling?
Around 7 years, I went to go to the Camp Grayling for summer camp for 2 weeks a year.
So for 7 years, you were there for 2 weeks every summer.
Right.
That's terrific. And what was going through your mind? What happened that gave you the idea that you needed to come up with an invention? You needed to create something to meet a need. What was the need there? What had happened that brought you to this thought?
We would go up in the middle of the base, which was around 40 square miles of base, and it was all native land. Nobody lived there because it was a military reservation, and it was so dark and so forlorn from anybody being able to live in this area. There was nothing going on except for the training sites that we were using for the 46th Infantry Division and for all the units of the 46th Infantry Division. And sometimes we'd have 3,000 to 4,000 troops training at the same time those 2 weeks at this camp. It's the largest National Guard and Reserve training camp in the United States, really.
Wow, that's terrific. And what type of equipment was there at the camp?
We had tanks, we had helicopters, we had infantry APCs that carried infantry. We had all sorts of the normal training we would do on the battlefield. And this was the main place which they would grade them and check them and see how well they were doing with the training that they had received.
That's great. And what were some of the problems that you observed during the training that you were looking for solutions for?
The biggest problem was at nighttime when we would start to maneuver into an attack at night. There was no light to see where you were going. We only had what they called cat eyes, a little narrow strip on the backs of the tanks that you could look up and see the tank in a clear day or a clear night. But when any of the dust started coming up from all those old dusty trails that we were on, you couldn't even see the other tank in front of you or anything else around you. So we said, well, geez, we don't need to be running over the next tank, and we don't need to be fighting someplace we can't see what we're doing. We need to be able to see at night. This was my big concern.
So there was nothing at the time that enabled you to actually see at night?
They had made an experiment with an Exxon unit, which mounted on 1 or 2 tanks just for experimental purposes, and they didn't work. They were green looking. You couldn't see what was out there. You couldn't see more than 20 yards ahead of you, and it was not really very efficient. You couldn't make out a person on the street or on the road.
So the personnel must have been a little frustrated.
If you were trying to fight a war, you couldn't fight a war that way. And I kept saying, we've got to get light on the battlefield. We've got to see where we're going and be able to see the enemy or see whatever we're fighting at, rather than just riding around in the dust.
So I'm sure there must have been some accidents during the nighttime since they couldn't see.
Several tanks ran into each other, knocked their tracks loose and come loose and dented them up, and trucks and things that did the same thing, ran off the road, couldn't see where they were going and go down a hill. So it was a mess. You know, we just didn't have the facilities for us to tell where we were going.
Wow. So you thought, I've got to figure out something here. There was something. What was that thought that triggered you to start?
We got to come up with
way?
a device that we can actually see at nighttime with. Because I always looked at it and tell the guys, "Hey, look, when the sun comes up in the morning, the night disappears. I want to make the night disappear at night. It's the only way we're ever going to see at night where we're going and what we're doing, and saving lives from being into ambushes where the enemy is waiting for us. At least we could see ahead of time what was coming and avoid it." So I started coming up with ideas and trying to find out what I could use to do this with. So I started looking for information at Fort Knox when I went to Fort Knox just before I went to summer camp this year. And at the electronics division, they had all sorts of devices that you could get, like the wires you need, diodes that you would need, things that would go into the place that you were going to be mounting this thing so you could see. And so after going through that and picking out several fuses and tubes and different things that we needed to go into this unit to expand the light capture, and the only thing we were going to have out in the wild was to be able to pick up the light from the stars and to amplify those into it become a powerful light inside of our scope. And the scope would have to affect some kind of material that would absorb the darkness away and leave the light. And so this is what our main object was.
Wow, so you were thinking, even on a moonless night, you were thinking the only light available that you were going to use was actually starlight?
Starlight.
Wow,
So
that's incredible. And as you say, nothing had been invented or created enabling humans to see by starlight.
Nope.
Animals, I guess, had,
Yeah.
but humans up to this point hadn't had that
no way.
capability of being able to see past the dust and past the dark.
That's right.
And so all these accidents were happening.
And when you're out in the jungles like we were, it was actually a jungle with trees and nothing else but, and hills and rolling hills. The dark is so dark, it's pure dark outside of the stars. And of course, when you're out there in the open yourself and see the stars, you don't have that much light. You have to combine the light from the stars in order to explode it into a major light fixture that you could use to start projecting a way to get the blackness out of the night.
So combining the starlight, the light of the starlight was one of the things you thought is, I've got to figure out a way
To make it
to
work.
make this work, to bring light in the darkness
Yeah.
by using the starlight.
To eliminate the darkness.
Wow. So you were doing this at summer camps. Now, the year was 1963. Now, what happened between 1962 and 1963? You went away from camp in 62, and then you went home
Yeah.
here to where were you living at the time?
I was living in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Kalamazoo. Okay, so you went back to Kalamazoo, back to your regular job.
Right.
And what were the steps that you came up with in your
Well,
mind?
I had to go back to Fort Knox to go through the officer advanced course. And while there, they had the only electronic division left in that part of the world because they were working with communications for armor, communications for infantry, and they had most all the parts that would be there. And I had to go through that to find out what they had available that I could use. And by getting into the details of it with the wires and the rheostats and all the problems that we would have to have, I came up with the idea of finding out what kind of filter I could get that would filter out the darkness and how I could get it to do that. And I found out that there was some stuff that was in Germany, in the area of Munich, that they had discovered that they didn't know what to do with, but it did glow even whenever you had no light on it at night.
So what was this material that Germany had that glowed?
It was a carbon filter, a carbon really that I wanted to turn into a filter. by
So it's just
using
raw carbon.
raw carbon, yeah. And it was an unusual kind of carbon because it had a lot of other minerals in it. I didn't know what those minerals were, but it caused the light to actually make it white looking like another scope would be putting on it. And so I said, well, if I can get this together and get it inside of a unit and heat up the light amplifier that I was designing, then it would actually suck out the darkness out of the night and would leave it clear what was out there.
Wow, that seems incredible.
Yep.
So in thinking through this, you thought, I need a lot of electronics here. I need some wire. I need rheostats. I need things that are here available
Yep.
locally. But then you were looking for a material that you couldn't find locally, obviously.
Right.
You could only find it in Germany.
Yeah.
Wow, so it was a carbon that you found in Munich that they didn't know what to do with. Had it come from mines, or how did Germany
It came
have
from
this?
a mine, of some sort of a light coal mine that they had found and been working for years, but it was not the same kind of coal mine we have over here. So no one had come up with it over here, but it was there, and they didn't know where it came from or how it was formed, but they had a lot of it, and they were using it as waste material. They were just getting it out of the mines and throwing it away.
So you took their garbage and you made something amazing from it.
Yeah.
So once you found this carbon in Germany, you thought, I've got to get this carbon to make my filter. So how do you make a carbon filter exactly?
You have to compress it under high pressure to make a washer, not a little
Waffle
disc,
kind of
waffle
thing?
type thing,
Yeah.
between two screens that would hold it together.
Oh, so you have two screens and the carbon goes between them, and you press them together to make a very thin filter.
Thin filter, yeah.
Interesting. Does it take a lot of heat, or how do you get the filter to be made?
We
with
just
the
used a
carbon?
pressure machine to press it down real tight, and it had to be a certain thickness so that the screens could fit. And we had to fit that inside of the unit that was the scanner that was looking out to pick up all the light of the information and the darkness that was coming into the camera.
Okay, so before we get to that part, you had heard of carbon filters, but what carbon filters were in existence before you created this new carbon filter? What were the carbon filters?
Most of them are real
used
dark,
for?
black, almost like coal, almost like a cinder from wood, but that did not have the opportunity to make anything glow.
What were they using these carbon filters for in the United States at the time?
The ones that we got, there was nothing being used for them. It was just something they had found and didn't know what to do with them, and they were actually throwing them away.
In Germany.
In Germany.
But in the United States, we did have one form of carbon filter, but that was something different, or we didn't have any carbon
It had
filters?
nothing like this.
Oh, so there were no carbon filters in existence. You
That was-
actually had to create a carbon filter.
We had this filter, we had the material, and then we just compressed it and put it between these two screens, and actually activated it that way.
Wow.
When the light went on, it glowed.
So, creating this carbon filter, once you created it and the light hit it, because it had a fluorescence quality, can you say?
Yeah.
Then it created a glow on this carbon filter.
It glowed.
So this was key to your invention, is
Yes.
this carbon filter. What were the other parts of the filter? Or, I'm sorry, what were the other parts of the star scope you needed to actually activate this?
We
carbon
needed this
filter?
the heat and the light amplifier to do that. This one would glow onto it and would cause the thing to brighten up, and it would start the absorption process.
So the light would be absorbed into the carbon and start to glow, okay?
And that would pull out the darkness and leave the light,
So,
leave the clearness. In other words, minus dark is nothing but light.
right,
So
right.
that's what we had to come up with, the
So
minus
once
dark.
it started picking this up and glowing, then you were able to then amplify that light? So you had to have an amplifier to
Yep.
be able to do that.
Yep.
And then that would go into a rheostat, or what would
Right.
then what would be
The
the next
rheostat
part?
would adjust the power of the light and how much power you would have going into it. And it's almost like adjusting a telescope. You dial it, and it goes too light, it goes too low. You bring it to the medium place.
Oh, interesting. So you needed that to be able to adjust it.
And that
So
was-
the light hits the carbon filter, which hits the rheostat, which then is amplified, correct?
Right.
And what is it that you use to amplify this?
It was almost like a telescope. You had an adjusting thing. It would allow so much light in and so much light out, so that you get it right to the point where the light is just the right. You get your brightness coming in just right, and that's where you stop. And then you
Interesting.
make sure that your power is the right amount. Your power had to be just exactly right on the rheostat in order to not burn up the fuses.
Oh, so of course you had fuses as well.
Yeah.
And then how did it then get to a monitor? How did you think of a
We
monitor?
had a telescope.
Where did that come from?
We had a camera, a TV camera, that was looking into the unit, and it was projecting the images that was out beyond the filter into the scopes and into the TV monitor that we had sitting in front of the gunner.
So you had a TV monitor. So the light from, say, another tank, if you were looking at another tank, the light from that tank would first come through a lens, correct?
Right.
And then that would be able to be adjusted
Right.
to a carbon filter,
And
this
we
carbon
adjust it.
filter that you created. And then from there it would go to a rheostat,
Yep.
correct? And then from there it would go to an amplifier,
Amplifier.
correct? And then from there it would go to a monitor.
The monitor.
And then from the monitor, how did you get a monitor? Where did you find a monitor?
On old TV sets that had the little small screen about this size, you could pick those up at the stores because that's about the size everybody was using at that time.
Right.
Little bitty ones.
Right.
And so it hooked directly into the view part of that, right from the TV camera that was looking into the monitor.
And it just connected in because of the adjustments were correct and the lens and all of that. And so wow. So before we get to the point at which you turned it on, let me ask another question: is How did radar work, and what was the comparison between how radar works and how the star scope was going to work?
Well, the radar would usually take enough power to pick up the veins, the lines of scan, which went out to look at an airplane. And it had to be adjusted how far you were looking and what your search range was out to our airplane. And the same thing had to be, we had to have the tubes that would light up strong and light up low from the light that we were picking off from the stars after we amplified it.
Ah, interesting. Now radar didn't use carbon in their technique.
They were strictly using a radar beam.
A radar beam. Now, were they picking up light? Was that one of the things that they were picking up?
They were picking up movement.
Movement. It was purely movement.
The airplane moving, and they could tell us on the spot.
So it really doesn't have a lot to do with it. Did it inspire you in doing the star scope?
I needed to have enough adjustment with lights like the radar tubes were doing there in order to get the right picture looking out, so it wouldn't be dull or flat, just dead center of what we wanted to see.
So radar did give you some inspiration on how to do this, but of course the key was that carbon filter.
That's right.
That was what hadn't been created.
Yep.
And what's interesting to me is Germany, of all places, had this material.
They
were using it as waste.
Yep.
They were throwing it away, not knowing that you were about to create a star scope that they would want.
Yeah.
They would definitely want. So, but you were able to get that material.
Yep.
And so you combined all these things before you got back to that summer camp in '63, correct?
Yep.
So did you combine them at home? How did you?
I had the light amplifier put together at home, and I tested it there, but just to make sure I had the light and I could shine it on the wall and reduce it in size until it almost faded, could adjust it back up. So knowing really that if I had it adjusted, it was working right.
Okay.
So I knew that part was all set to go.
So that part was set to go, but some of the other components you hadn't tested yet, correct?
No.
So I guess you really couldn't test it until you got back to Camp Grayling.
That's right.
During that summer of '63.
Yeah.
So where did you install your star scope?
It was in my tank, the tank that I was in, the command tank. In a tank company, you have 17 tanks. The company commander has a tank and a crew. And we have platoon leaders that have a tank and a crew. We had around 17 tanks in the company. But I had my tank parked right next to another tank of one of the platoon leaders. And I said, we're going to pull in here so that we'd have something to look at. I said, we can look at a tree, but we want to look at something that's a structure that we can actually tell the difference of what it is. So we pulled in and pointed it right at this tank, and we got in and was putting all this stuff together. And had the guys out, and they were putting in plugs, they were running wires into the box and everything that we had set up. And this colonel comes over, and he's our evaluator to see what we're doing in our cannon training.
So this is the colonel over you. This is your superior officer.
Says, what the heck are you doing here? I said, we're making a night vision device. He says, a what? I said, a night vision device, so we can see at night. He said, are you kidding me? I said, no, I'm serious. We're fixing to turn it on here in just a few minutes. We're putting it together right now. And so he crawled down into the tank and sat down in the loading seat where the gunner would have a loader. And we started putting it together, and I flipped over and I said, now, flip the switch on, and the tank commander flipped the switch over on his side that we had, and the light came on, and we could see the tank. Then I adjusted it just a little bit and got a clear picture of it.
Of the tank?
Off the tank. I said, now I'm going outside and stand in front of this tank, and here's my Polaroid camera. I want you to take a picture of what you see on this screen. So I went out and stood in front of the tank, and they clicked a picture of me. And the tank commander's looking at that, he says, I ain't believing this. And the colonel says, me neither. I said, I can't believe this is going on, you know. He crawled out of there, and the first thing he got a hold of was the evaluator that was out there on the side of the tank. And he got up in and looked at it, and he says, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, this is real. And he says, my God, we got to get this thing out of here and to Lexington, Kentucky tomorrow. And so he crawled out of there, and he went to his Jeep and got on the radio, and he called the guy that was asleep. Already it was 11:30 at night. And he says, get the C-47 and have your crew down here tomorrow morning just as soon as you can get here.
Wow.
And they were there about 10 o'clock the next morning.
So this whole crew flew in the next morning?
Flew in the next morning. And they came out, and he stayed there until that next night. And we ran it through again and moved the tank around, moved the turret. We was looking at everything all the way around us. And they were just flabbergasted. They said, let's get it out of here. Let's get it out of here as quick as we can. If you got it all where we can pick it up in one piece, I said, no, you got to put it in a couple of boxes to take it with you. And here's your schematic, and here's your chart where all the wires go and all the things hook up to. And they took it out of there and got back into the airplane and flew out of there the next day and got back to Lexington, Kentucky. And Weyerhaeuser met them there because they'd already called Weyerhaeuser and says, we got something you got to see. Get somebody down here as quick as you can.
And who was Weyerhaeuser?
Weyerhaeuser is the one that was helping put together the one that they're going to build and send to Vietnam.
Oh,
they wanted people that could manufacture this thing.
What was his position, Weyerhaeuser? Was he a colonel?
No, the Weyerhaeuser was a civilian organization that the Army got in touch with just for contracts.
Oh, for contracts.
We need you to make this thing as quick as you can make it.
Oh, we need you to produce this.
Produce this and get it to Nam just as quick as you can get them over there.
So they were very urgent.
They were ready to go.
And so they took everything, your whole creation, your whole invention, and they took it out of there.
It was gone the next day.
It was gone the next day.
I never saw it again. Never saw it again.
Wow. Well, what were your emotions during this time?
God, I hope they do the right thing because it's ready. You know, all they got to do is just modernize it a little bit, maybe make it a little smaller, compact unit so they can use it. Because mine was several pieces all over the place.
Yes.
And so they immediately started working on reducing the size, making it compact. And this one guy actually said, we're going to make goggles out of it. With the goggles, we can run the same wires up to 2 goggles and have the filters where they can all work.
Wow. They could have monitors up here as goggles, monitors as goggles. Wow. Well, you must have been pretty excited when all that happened.
This is great. That's a good shot. I mean, so we'll let you know what's going on. And so that before we left camp, they'd already given me a citation for doing it and given me a plaque and everything to go with the division.
I believe I have that picture here. So here is...
That's Colonel Pond.
So you're on which side here?
Yeah. I am on the right side.
So you're over here.
And the colonel is there presenting me with the plaque.
Wow, that's really exciting. So this was Colonel Pond.
Irwin C. Pond.
And he was there at Camp Grayling.
And he was my battalion commander.
Oh, so here's your battalion. So you're actually getting an award here.
Yeah.
For this invention.
That's right.
That's pretty. And what did they call it at the time?
Starscope. I called it.
So they used the word that you would use.
Still a Starscope.
So they were actually using your created word Starscope.
And even today, it's called Starscope.
Even today, it's still called the Starscope.
Yep.
Which you came up with the name. Well, you didn't created it. You'd invented
we was using the stars,
the carbon filter that enabled this to become a reality.
Yeah.
So wow, how exciting! This must have been very, very exciting for you.
It was a great idea. It was a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I knew the guys in Nam were having a rough time, and Jesus, in those jungles over there, you don't see nothing. You have to look very close to even see anything that's during the nighttime when there's no lights at all.
So one of your motivations actually was because Vietnam was happening at the time, that I want to save lives.
Yeah.
How many lives do you believe that this has saved?
I don't know, but I had a captain that came back while I was at Knox the second time, the year following that, and he flew me up on a little flight trip with him up over Louisville just to fly around. And he was telling me when he was going up there, I said, well, did you ever use those Starscopes? He said, are you kidding me? He said, I saved some lives with that thing. He said, we were out on a mission to drop these guys off at a drop zone. And he said, as soon as I got into there to see the drop zone, I could see the Viet Cong on the ground everywhere.
Because of the Starscope?
Because of the Starscope. And he said, I banked that thing out of there and we left. I had about 30 guys on that helicopter. He said,
that saved 30 lives right there.
Yeah. He said, you better believe I wouldn't even go out on a helicopter without that thing on at night. He said, that's the only way we could see where we were going. And see the enemy that's sitting out there waiting for us, So it was a real smoothing thing to hear, that those lives had been saved, and probably hundreds.
Oh, maybe thousands.
You never know how many people escaped because of that.
How many different pieces of equipment today are equipped with a Starscope?
Yeah.
Tanks,
Yeah.
Of course the goggles, helicopters, trucks.
They all go with them.
All using a Starscope.
If you'll see on the TV where they're wearing their helmets, you see this little clip on their top of their helmet?
Yes.
That's where the Starscope goes. They bend it down over their eyes and they got view right there.
Wow. Yeah, I think we could safely say tens of thousands of lives, if not more. have been saved because of this
That's one
invention
spark,
that you did in 1963.
63.
Well, no wonder the colonel must have been pretty astonished. I think you gave him the honors of pulling the switch, right?
He
First.
He flipped the first switch.
So until this switch was actually flipped,
Yeah.
you weren't sure whether it was going to even work.
Nope.
So this is a risk. The colonel is coming down. You tell the colonel, we're working on night vision here. I've created something here that's night vision, and he's thinking, what? This is impossible. And so he has enough faith to crawl down into the tank, which is a little uncomfortable to be able to do. And then you had a lot of guts to be able to say, hey, Colonel, I'll let you be the one to flip the switch.
Yep.
And it came on.
When it came on, I reached over where the tube was that went out through the reflector and adjusted it just like you'd adjust a periscope or telescope. And the picture was a little fuzzy, and then it got clear, right up to the point it was perfectly clear. We just left it right there.
So it was that simple.
That's simple.
So it went from you not quite sure whether this was going to work or not, but you had a lot of confidence in this. Everything was wired up by you and the crew, helping you wire everything up, putting on everything that needed to be put on. The colonel comes down, flips the switch. You make a little bit of an adjustment, and there it is. There's your image.
So here, let me go get my picture.
And so, what did he say? What did the colonel first say when he saw this?
He says, "I just can't believe this." He said, "I'm amazed." He said, "I'm amazed. I just can't believe this is happening." And the other colonel that came in after the next day when they all came in and wanted to see it, they were flabbergasted. He said, "You got to be kidding! This is happening." He says, "I can't believe this is happening. This ain't natural. This ain't we just don't believe this kind of thing could happen." That's what the other colonel, the sergeant came in and says, "Are you sure this is going to work?" I says, "I hope so, because I'm working."
Wow. Well, of course, they'd never seen anything. It had never been invented.
No.
Nobody, I'm sure that people had thought, wouldn't it be nice if? But you were the one that said, well, I'm tired of driving around in the dust and tired of tanks running into tanks and not being able to see anything. We got to make something happen here.
Right.
And you went back to your garage and put together these parts and then figured out that you could get this special carbon from Germany that they were throwing in the dump heap that would glow, that would have a fluorescence quality to be able to make that carbon filter out of two mesh wires and carbon and put it all together the way you did. I can see where the colonel and everyone in that tank must have been astonished. I'm sure that no one forgot that day, including you. Would never forget that day. And in fact, we even have the picture that the Polaroid shot in the tank when you went out of the tank and got in front of the tank being viewed with the star scope. We have that picture.
There it is.
So this is you, correct?
Right.
Standing in front of another tank.
Right in front of my platoon sergeant's tank.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. You look pretty happy there.
Yep. I said, well, I'm hoping all of this turns out just right. And all of the tank says, it's turned out right. We're gone with it.
Wow.
Thank you so much. We're gone.
Wow.
They said, we can't get to the station and to the laboratory quick enough to put all this stuff together. And they were ready to roll.
So once they realized that this was working, this wasn't a fluke, this wasn't a joke, this is actually working, then they said, we've got to get this to NAM immediately.
And the first thing the colonel's told me after that, he says, we don't talk about this. This is classified. He said, I don't know how far it's going to classify, but it's classified now. Tell your guys when you get them together, quiet is the word. This is classified. And eventually it was secret. It was secret for around 2 years or 3 years, close to 3 years. And it was all kept quiet because nobody else in the world had done this before. And we don't want everybody to know what it took to do it. And we're going to try to keep people from getting their hands on it because they'll figure out what's going on as soon as they do.
That meant you couldn't even tell your wife.
Yeah.
Here's one of the most exciting moments of your life, your coolest invention to date.
2 years, I couldn't say a word.
And you couldn't even tell your wife.
I'd have gone to jail.
Wow. So when they say classified, they mean serious.
They mean it.
They would take you to jail for talking about your own invention.
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so then it became secret.
Yeah.
What did you hear about with the production? How did they get the carbon since it was so difficult for you?
I told them where I got it because I had the address.
You told them about Germany.
The unit in Germany.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they flew in half a ton of it, I think, the first time on a cargo plane.
The Germans are like, "You wanting our junk?"
Yeah, what do you want to do with this?
How interesting.
We didn't say.
Sure. Later on, they figured it out.
Yeah, they figured it out.
They figured it out. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you did hear that they actually had gotten a hold of the carbon they needed, and so you started to see these products come out, and the Starscope being used in the tanks and the goggles, and wow, that's really, really exciting.
And the thing that really amazed me was here just only a few years ago when they killed bin Laden. The guy that went into bin Laden and shot him was interviewed on the Fox News channel, and he was telling them what he did. He says, as soon as all of us got out of our helicopters, we had our Starscopes on. And he went in with the Starscope still on his eyes and killed bin Laden.
Wow. And there was your invention right in the middle of it,
right in the middle
still being called the name that you named it, the Starscope.
I said, yes! That was a good day for me.
Well, that was, very exciting.
Yeah,
well,
very good day.
What an honor to be able to talk about this and be able to hear this from your own mouth and to hear the story. I'm sure that many, many people will be fascinated to hear this, and the fact that it was classified and secret, no one could talk about even you being the inventor.
Right.
And of course, because you were on duty. And
Mum's the word.
Mum's the word. And so the invention actually became the Army's creation because you were in the Army at the time. Is that correct?
What you do in the Army belongs to the Army.
What you do in the Army belongs to the Army. So your contribution was...
but I was proud to do it.
Yep. I suppose somebody with less scruples would say, well, I'm going to guard this for myself and just sort of do it on the side. But because of your heart for just saving lives and saying, we've got to get this going now, we've got to start helping people now, you just contributed that to the Army, to the cause. And again, the many, many lives that were...
And they used it all over Iraq and Syria. They're still using it everywhere.
Yeah.
And whenever they invaded Iraq there, when the big war took place, the guys on the ground had them. They were going. It was nighttime on those big deserts. You can't see very much at all at nighttime, but they could see with those.
Yep. Wow. Very, very exciting. Well, Curt, it's an honor to be able to be with you and talk about this. As a kid, I remember thinking how cool, it is, night vision, Starscope, it's really cool. And of course, I had no idea where it came from. I just knew it was a cool invention, and as you say, we all know it's being used everywhere. We see whether in every war since Vietnam, these.
As a matter of fact, the North Koreans have still got it on their helmet too.
They do.
I saw the helmet. See, the last time they were showing a picture of them marching, all of them had the clips up here and had.
Yep. So it's being imitated.
Yeah.
It's being imitated, but the original is right here. So I'm sitting with the original right here. And wow, very, very cool. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm glad now you can talk about some of this stuff because I'm sure it's really hard to keep such good news inside and only be able to talk to how many men were with you that you could actually talk to? Like four guys?
Four guys.
4 guys, that's it?
That's it.
So you guys could go out, have a beer and talk about it, and that's it. And
that's it.
That's it. So
nobody else.
Yep, well, really exciting. Well, I this is an untold story. This is an untold history that needs to get out there. I think it's time to be able to get it out there so people know where this came from. And they know the thoughts behind it and the heart behind it, the desire behind it to create something that would really, really save lives, help the cause. Yeah. And you're a true patriot, and we thank you for your service. Very, very exciting stuff. Thank you so much.
Glad to do it.
Thank you for the interview time.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being with us and enjoying this great interview. So how long were you in the Army then?
41 years and 8 months.
41 years and 8 months. And did you work on other projects?
Yep, had quite a few. I was assigned to the Pentagon for around 8 years, and I put a lot of things in for them. Quite a few ideas that we worked on, things that I had worked on. I said, let's do this, let's try this, and it worked. Mm-hmm. And we had all sorts of problems that came up with stuff that people already had invented. and they'll say, "Can you find a problem with this?" I said, "I think I know what it is. Let me show you." And I'd get in there and help them find a solution to the problem in about a half a dozen different things, and some other things that I helped them create that most of the people had never heard of before. So it was a soothing thing to do. They wouldn't let me go. They would call me and say, "Be up at the Greenville Airport tomorrow morning at 8:00. We're picking you up. We'll have you at the Pentagon." And it's about 2:00, and we got.
So you were on call.
I was on call.
Wow.
Constantly on call.
On call and zipping up to the Pentagon all the time.
8 years. I spent several 2-week periods up there too from my summer camp. When I was over there in the East Coast and over when I was here, I'd fly up to the Pentagon for 2 weeks.
And could you talk about these things you were doing at the Pentagon?
No.
Again, even with your wife, you couldn't even talk about this stuff. So
No.
these were all classified things you were
Mom
working
is the
on.
word.
Wow.
When you walk out the door, you don't know anything about what you've done. You have no idea what you did.
Well, I don't want to get you into trouble with this question, but I want to go ahead and ask if it's safe to answer. What are some of the other cool things you worked on at the Pentagon that are now unclassified? Obviously, they were classified at the time, but what are some of the other things that you got to work on?
One of them we was working on with the Russians didn't have too good a metallurgist, didn't know how to make metal put together. And they had ball bearings that weren't working. And they tried to steal the ones from us, and we found out there was a guy over here that was a spy, had worked his way in to the ball bearing factories that we had and was trying to figure out how we put them together. We found out ahead of time, so we got together with some of our people that knew what was going on and said, "We want to make ball bearings for them, and we want to make them so they won't blast." And we put stuff into it and made it loose, so that when they got those ball bearings in their tanks in Russia, they'd go 50 miles and they'd turn to dust. They'd just crumble inside of the tank. And the tanks were helpless. They couldn't move them, they couldn't fix them, they couldn't do anything with them, they had to leave them. That really teed off the Russians. They didn't like that at all.
And did it succeed? Did the ball bearings get produced by Russians?
No, they didn't. They produced the bearings, but they were all bad.
They were all bad.
We made them so they'd be all bad.
So they thought they had the cutting edge technology, and it all fell apart on them.
All fell apart.
So the joke on them then.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny. That's really
That was a
creative.
different kind of thing we call top secret. It was called a misinformation.
Misinformation. Okay.
All this is misinformation.
Okay.
We don't tell nobody anything, but it's misinformation.
So not only did you get to create things that were very helpful, you also got to create things that were misinformation
Yeah.
for the enemy.
Yeah. I asked one CIA man that came once to one of our meetings with the retired officers, and I said, "How's the misinformation program going?" He said, "Still a secret. That's still a secret."
Wow. Were there other things that you remember that stand out to you that was a real cool thing that you
There
worked
was one
on?
we did the pistol that fired ice bullets.
Oh my. An ice bullet. A bullet made out of ice.
Made out of
H2O.
ice, frozen to 40 degrees below zero.
H2O or another component?
H2O.
H2O. Wow.
At 40 degrees, it remains stable. You can't mess with
40 degrees below zero?
it. Yeah. And it's about 3 to 10%, depending, harder than regular steel would be, the way they would make it. And it fits into a clip that's mounted into a freezer, and the bullets are mounted in the clip, and the agent would take it and put it in his little refrigerator unit on his hip that had a battery that powered it to 40 below zero and kept it there.
So there was a component on his hip that was kept at 40 below?
Yep.
Wow.
Had
Through a battery.
Battery pack kept it strong. He'd take this clip out and slide it into the pistol. He could walk up to an enemy spy that's somewhere in Europe or Austria or someplace and go, that's the end of him. And he just walks away. No sound, no noise. It had a built-in silencer, made no noise.
And so the enemy would be shot with several H2O frozen bullets.
And they'd melt and leave no trace.
So he would be mortally or fatally injured, and there'd be no trace other than
trace.
water.
No.
Well, even the water would probably disappear. So they would see puncture wounds, but have no idea how it happened.
Yep. And the guy just does it in a crowd where there's a crowd of people. He just walks away, and the guy falls on the street. He may be screaming and hollering, but nobody knows what's wrong with him.
Wow. So this was another invention that you got to work on that was actually used on the field.
Yep. And
oh my goodness.
CIA agents all had those available to them.
Wow, that's very exciting. That's really, really exciting. Is there another final one? I know we're running out of time, but a final project that you can think of?
Well, there's several others, but I don't even know if they're cleared yet.
Okay, okay. Well, I don't want to get you in trouble. We'll just end there.
Yeah, this one's all had white papers on it. They know about that. Everybody knows about it. Yeah.
Well,
White paper is the only way you can get a clearance on a secret or top secret. Once this white paper comes out on it, you can talk about it, but you can't talk about anything other than white paper stuff.
well, since we have some time, why don't you talk about some of the other inventions you've made that aren't classified, things that you've patented?
Yeah, I've had
what are the things that you've patented that you are most interested in?
the hammer with the handle that's like a pistol, so that it takes the carpal tunnel out of your wrist. And then I've took that gutter support that goes into another gutter, so you can put your ladder up on the house and go up on the roof.
That won't damage the gutter. So it's really a protection for the gutter, so the gutter doesn't get damaged.
And I invented a car device that the automotive industry didn't think it was what they wanted to do. Of course, the automotive industry is pretty much independent of their own baby. They don't like other things that they can make. So when I approached them for this automobile device that would go on and so cars couldn't be stolen, they said, "Oh, we're working on our own thing. We're working."
So they still have not done what you're suggesting.
No, never did it.
And you have a patented idea,
Yeah.
correct? So can you talk about that patented idea?
Yeah, it takes off where you've got two sliding bolts under the hood and an eye down mounted on the hood. It comes down. The sliding bolts slide in and lock the hood down, so you can't get under the hood. Run by remote control. Not only that, I took the wires that go to the switch where the key's at, cut them in two, put a switch there. When I hit that button and those bolts go forward, it turns off the switch. You can't hotwire it.
So it both bolts down the hood, so you can't get under the hood.
You can't get to the battery.
And you can't hotwire it
You
because
can't
it's not
hotwire
going to
it.
work.
Yeah. And the guy said, "Well, what did you do in case your battery's dead?" I said, "I took another set of cables from the battery. I've got two sets of cables on the battery. The ones that go to the motor, and these two run down and come out the side of the car right where the wheel's at.
For emergency purposes.
Emergency purposes. Clamp in, you got power."
Wow.
So you can, and if a guy stole your car and decided he's going to run away with it, like, come up and make you get out of the car with a gun, let him go about 20 yards and hit your button. It turns the motor off, locks the hood down. He can't do nothing. He's got to get out.
Yep.
And the only thing I missed on that one was the guy over in Clemson was telling me, he says, "Why didn't you lock his doors down?"
Oh, keep him in the car. Well, yeah.
I love it. He's got to get out of that car.
Yeah. If it's on fire, yeah, I
He's got
guess.
to get out of that car.
Yep, it would provide some comedy, but
Yeah.
probably not. Probably wouldn't pass the court test.
Yeah, and I was trying to do something for California because California burns, And I went to Clemson University to the not the patent office, but the research and development office at Clemson, which handles a lot of patents going through it. I said, "What I'd love to do is to see if you could find. I don't know where to look. I need to find material that won't burn, cannot burn at all. I want to make a blanket that will cover a house completely.
Wow.
It goes up on the house and it's in a container. And in case there's fire coming, it's going to be there tomorrow or the next day. You get up and you undo it. You roll it over this side and down the sides. And you pin it to the ground where it can't be blown over.
Right.
And it completely covers the whole house. So what you'd have to do, you'd have to get a design of the house, the measurements and everything, and have a company that makes these things custom make it for that house.
For that house.
And it just rolls up into a bundle, and you get up on the roof and unroll it, down this way, down that way, pin it to the ground, and it's fireproof and it won't burn.
Wow.
The fire can land on it, the shingles, any place, but everything's covered. The roof, the sides, everything. The doors, the windows, everything is just completely blocked. We could get one that would be 2,200 degrees, but the fires are 3,380 degrees. Too high. It just wouldn't protect it. It wouldn't be strong enough to resist the fires that were that hot.
Wow.
So it would go through there and it would cause the house to ignite under the cover.
Right. Yeah. Like a kiln.
Spontaneous combustion.
Yep. Like a kiln.
But the idea, they said, was great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and while we were working on that, and the guy was designing it up and trying to get all the different places, we got calls 3 or 4 times from the state fire marshal in California. What have you found? What have you found? What have you found? I said, well, we can't get one that'll take enough heat. There just isn't anything right now that we know of that will resist the heat, because you get spontaneous combustion even under when it's 6 inches thick.
Wow.
I said, if you
Wow.
get 6 inches thick of fireproof stuff, and it still causes so much heat, massive heat, that the inside of the house just erupts in flames.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like a really great idea. Well, maybe someday we will have the material, the technology to develop the material in order to do that. But what a tremendous idea.
My idea for California is to build a house out of stuff that won't burn. Build it out
Yeah.
of brick, stone, steel, concrete, and use those clay tiles for the roof.
Yeah.
And use metal studs and metal rafters. They won't burn either. And your inside house, you've got fireproof drywall. You've got steel doors you can put in it, and none of that's going to burn. It can get hot, but it's not going to burn.
Yeah.
And another thing, other than using that, the houses that are out there that need to be protected, you can go up on the eave of the roof and run a pipe from one end of the house to the other that sprays water out over the
Constantly.
whole,
To constantly
over.
spray water.
And down on the ground, you could have strips that are buried in the ground with little things that stick up, constantly washing the walls, completely washing it front, back, side, and ends. Because when the fire's coming, in 2 hours it's gone.
Yes.
Turn it wide open for 2 hours and just get out of there.
Yep.
Then the trees are burned, the grass is burned, but the house is still there.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
nobody's thought of that yet.
Yeah. Well, you did.
Yeah.
So with the hammer, I know that you developed the hammer because of an angle or because of the wrist. What was the?
Because of the wrist.
Because of the wrist.
Normally when builders are building a house, they go in like this. See the wrist?
So they're using the wrist like this.
Yeah.
With a conventional hammer.
Now you lock your wrist and you go this way.
Oh, so this will take away from carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
It's as if you have a brace on.
You get a brace.
Or if you had a brace, you'd be able to use it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Same thing.
Interesting. So it saves your wrist
Saves your wrist.
all that movement.
Yep. Because I had builders telling me, I just can't use a hammer anymore. My wrist is gone. I go to the doctor, they operated here and took this out,
Oh, wow.
fixed that. And every time I try to use a hammer again, it just feels like my hand's going to come off. So they got the automatic hammers, which are fine.
Yep.
You know, boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
boom, boom, boom. That's great. That works well.
But for manual stuff, if you do need that,
Yeah, yeah.
then that hammer's
That's
a
true.
wrist saver.
A wrist saver.
A wrist
Yeah.
saver.
A wrist saver. But the guy told me, well, I got a problem with my wrist. I thought, well, no wonder you got a problem with your wrist. You're doing like this all the time. Well, what are you going to do? I said, lock your wrist, use your arm.
Yep.
Then with a pistol grip, it's easier to do.
Yes.
Because you hold it like this, and it comes out, comes down, and over like this.
Right.
It's still in the position, when you hold it like
Yep.
that, it's still in the position to drive with. You know?
Yep.
You don't have to whip it.
That's great.
And that's most of my stuff that I've worked on. I've had a lot of other different little ideas. I've made made a cutter that cuts hedgerow out there, where you cut the hedgerow and you have the garbage standing nearby. When it cuts it, it holds the hedgerow grove.
So you can dump it.
Open it up, drop it in the trash, cut, drop it in the trash.
That's great for hollies.
Yep. And it doesn't get down inside of the bush and
Where
turn
it
brown
dies
all
and
that,
it gets
you know?
brown, yeah.
Yeah. That was another one that I made just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Plus my grape picker.
Oh yes, the grape
Grape
picker.
picker.
Yeah.
That was for me. And I made a fish thing that you could, when you're fishing and you throw your line out and it gets hooked on a log and you can't get it loose. So I made a steel thing about this big around, and I cut the angles like this through there with a hacksaw, so that you could actually wind the wire, your string around it, and you have that on a different pole, and you got a little hook on the end of it that you tie a string to, and you slide it down the line that's stuck, and just let it go all the way out into the water till it bangs into the hook, knocks it loose, and you pull it in. The other one too.
Wow, interesting. Interesting. That's great.
Well, you don't lose your hook out there.
That's great. You may think, how come other people don't come up with this? But it takes a special mind to come up with these things. Most of us don't take the time to think about how can we solve this problem.
I've lost probably half a dozen or more fish hooks on good lines and good hooks
Before your invention.
before I did that. And I could just set the line down on the ground here, and put that thing on the line that's stuck, and just zip it right out there and let it go out on the end of another pole. And once it goes out there, I pull it back like this and let it slide forward. It goes in and hits that hook that's stuck into the log and knocks it loose. Then I pull them both in.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
It was fun.